Sneaking out at 3 a.m. isn't the smartest thing to do. My friend lived in a super rural, small, country town and I had come to spend the summer with her at her grandparents' house. We were both about 13 at the time, we are now both 22, and thought it'd be a good idea to sneak out and walk around the town, maybe stop by the park. As we were walking down this one road, about 30 minutes after we left the house, we noticed somebody following us, wearing all black with a hoodie. We both got pretty creeped out and quickly rounded a corner before hiding in the dark of some bushes. After the guy passed us and we waited about another 30 minutes, we decided we should probably head back to her house. So we ran there. Once we got back inside, we couldn't really go to sleep, so we did an all-nighter. The next morning, we see on the news that a woman was stabbed, assaulted, and killed on the exact road we had been on that night, and we couldn't help but wonder if the attacker was the man who had been following us. Safe to say we didn't sneak out again after that. I was followed and chased by a guy with a knife that had a clown/Joker face paint on at 3 a.m. This happened over 10 years ago when I was in my early 20s, but I still remember it like it was yesterday. I have only shared this story with my family and a few friends, but this seems suitable for this sub. I was living in Japan at the time, so it was pretty normal to see people doing the whole cosplay thing. I'd see people dressed up in characters and dressed differently, but this was something else. I was out with a friend one night having a few drinks, just the usual dinner and booze at an izakaya lounge. Back then, it was pretty normal for me to either walk home or taxi home after midnight since the train stopped operating around 12:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. This was the case for many people that enjoyed the nightlife. It would often be pretty busy in the streets around that time. This particular night, my friend wanted to go clubbing with some of our other friends, but I had a pretty early morning start, so I decided to walk home. I lived about a 25-minute walk from the area we were drinking at. I often took a few shortcuts through some alleyways to get home quicker. As I turned the corner in one alleyway, I was face to face with a guy wearing clown face paint, but more like the Joker. As I mentioned, it was pretty normal for me to see people with cosplay and dressed differently, so I walked past him with a smile and kept walking. As I passed him, I noticed he had some blood on his clothes, which made me feel a little uncomfortable, but I kept walking. That's when I realized he started following me. I even made some unorthodox turns into different streets to try and get away. I walked faster, but he kept following me. I turned around and asked him if he was okay and if he needed help. That's when he put a big smile on his face, started giggling and pulled out a kitchen knife. I got freaked out, so immediately turned around and started running away from him. He then burst out in a screaming laugh and started skipping towards me. As I started running fast, he too then started running fast. As I was running away from him, I can still hear him giggling and running towards me. I was running for about 3 minutes, then I noticed a small construction site with garbage on the side of it. I saw one of those metal rods used in construction, and I quickly picked it up and turned around and yelled at him. We both came to a complete stop. He saw me with the metal rod and stopped running. I yelled at him and swung the metal rod once and told him I will hit him if he stepped closer. That's when he stopped. I started walking backwards to make sure he wasn't following me. After about a block of me walking backwards, he was just standing there. I turned around and started running home. I will never know if he was just trying to scare me or if he was actually a psychopath trying to kill me. Either way, it was one of the creepiest things to happen to me. Followed on campus at 3 a.m. I had to walk home around 3 a.m. after studying with my friend on our college campus. It was about a 10-minute walk from where I lived, and while I didn't like the idea of walking home alone, there were only 2 of us. Meaning if my friend had walked me, she'd need to make the trip back herself, and she's quite a bit smaller than I am. Before leaving, I put the hood of my coat up for 2 reasons. The first being it was snowing that night, and the second was I wanted to cover my hair in hopes I could prevent strangers from assuming me to be a girl. This is just something that makes me feel safer walking at night. I was making my way home and hadn't seen a single other person till I came to a crossroads, where I saw a man with a hat hiding his face headed in my direction. He was perpendicular to me, as I was headed horizontally on the roads and he was headed vertically. I'm a bit of a paranoid person, so I was already scared by this, but I hoped he would just continue away from me after we crossed paths. As I kept walking, I heard the sound of my footsteps crunching in the snow, joined by another pair crunching behind me. I was getting more worried at this point, but it was possible he was intending to go this direction from the start. So, I just kept walking and listening for him. Eventually I came to a road I needed to cross. I did so straight across in the crosswalk. Him, some distance behind me, crossed diagonally in my direction. He was trying to close the gap between us. After this he started calling out to me, "Sir! Sir!" I thank the Lord he thought I was a man, but I wasn't about to stop and hear what he had to say. As we got close to my building, I nervously moved my keys from my left pocket to my hand in my right pocket, getting ready to quickly go inside. At this point he gave up on following me. I don't know if my shifting something between my pockets made him nervous or if it was because we were back in an area where people lived. I decided to go wait in a 24-hour office where someone is always staffed rather than go into my building. I waited there for a bit, then went back to my place without a problem. I'm not sure what he wanted. People occasionally get robbed here now and then, which is what I was worried about at the time. I later thought maybe I'd dropped something and he was trying to return it or something, but all my possessions I had on me were accounted for. He could have been harmless, but no stranger approaching you alone at 3 a.m. feels harmless at the time. Thankfully nothing happened, but since then I've stopped walking by myself at night. He blocked the road at 3 a.m. I've had a few creepy things happen to me in my life, but this one I still think about how things could have went wrong very fast. I'm a 20-year-old female. This takes place back when I used to live in southern Indiana, like seriously, in the sticks. It was a weekend night and my best friend and I were coming home after our graveyard shift at a local waffle joint. She decided to get her dog from her house so we could stay at my place for the night. That's important later, so we start heading out into the country while I live, and to get to my house there's a long narrow dirt road you have to go down. About a mile in or so we see a truck's headlights. We get closer and it's a nice truck. Probably like a 2018 at least. I can't say I know much about cars, leave me alone lol, he's parked to where he's sideways, blocking the whole path. Confused, I get out and ask if he's okay. He looked hopeful when he saw me. At first I'm just waiting on a friend to come get me. My truck stuck. He smiled at me and I noticed his pupils were nearly completely dilated. He looks back to my car and sees that I have someone with me, and he looks at the dog sticking his head out the window. His smile fades. He says pit bulls are mean and nasty. He quickly turns around and gets back in his truck. I go back to my friend and I'm like, put this shit in reverse and use whatever hood race skills you have to get us out of here. So we take my poor 95-foot caddy that really shouldn't be driving on a dirt road anyway and back all the way up down that road and get back to the main road. Relieved, we take a different road home. Then, lo and behold, the same guy is parked on that road standing off to the side smiling, just looking into our headlights. We were completely about to shit ourselves and we gunned it the rest of the way home. I don't know how he got there before us or what his intentions were, but I'm thankful I wasn't alone being my naive college girl self. Stranger walks into my home at 3 a.m. 3 or 4 days ago my wife and I were sound asleep in our bedroom. Around 2:45 a.m., our German Shepherd Duke started barking viciously. We've never heard him bark like this before, so we assumed something was amiss. I got up to check and see if something was up, and ended up spilling a water on my nightstand. It took me 2 to 3 minutes to clean up the water, and I figured maybe Duke was simply barking at the rain. I went back to sleep and a few minutes later Duke starts again with the vicious bark. My wife starts freaking out and turns our lamp on. We sat in bed for a second spooked, and then we heard someone trying our front door. We heard the screen door clicking into place after being shut. The front door was locked, so he had no way to get in. At this point I'm freaked out and so is my wife. From our bedroom we can see a window in our kitchen that leads out front. My wife starts staring at it intensely and tells me she can see a shadow moving back and forth. She said it was a dark silhouette walking up and down our front sidewalk. At this point I'm getting scared, and when I get scared I get angry. I get up and turn on our kitchen light in hopes of spooking the stranger outside. You would think he would leave with our dog barking and lights turning on. At this point I didn't know what to do, and made a stupid mistake. I went to my garage and opened the garage door. I then realized I wasn't wearing shoes and went back to my living room to put them on. I wanted to go outside, find the disturbance and deal with it. Duke was with me the whole time, and when he suddenly turned and started running toward the door that connects to the garage, I knew I had messed up. I turned and looked, and this dude was just standing in my kitchen with mud on his face. Dude smelled like shit. He was wearing relatively decent clothes, and didn't appear homeless. I live in the heart of a really nice part of town. As I started approaching him, it looked like he was trying to take his jacket and shoes off. It was very bizarre. I yelled at him, "Get the fuck out of my house." While Duke was jumping, growling and barking at the guy. He took a step back and said something incomprehensible. I yelled, "It's 3 in the morning, get the fuck out of my house." And I shoved him. He sort of stumbled and made his way out of the house into the garage and then left. I shut the garage door and called the cops. The cops came and said there were a couple of meth heads in the area known to do things like this, except they didn't fit the description of the guy I described. I haven't been able to sleep for a few days now. I don't know what this guy was after. Best case scenario, he was incredibly fucked up and had no idea what he was doing. Maybe he thought it was his house since he started taking his shoes and jacket off. From the door leading from the garage and into the house there is a glass. Where I was standing he couldn't see me, but he could see my wife. Is it possible he saw her alone and thought maybe she was by herself and come in? The guy wasn't aggressive toward me, but he was also bigger than me. 6 feet 2 inches, 210 pounds. Before y'all say it, I know I shouldn't have opened the garage. He obviously took it as an open invitation, and I've felt guilt about it since the time it happened. I figured barking dogs, lights on, garage opening, normal burglar would just scram. My wife and I are incredibly lucky he wasn't armed or couldn't do anything violent toward us. Can anyone help me brainstorm about motives? I just can't understand how anyone in their right mind would act the way he did.